Hello, this is Tony Heller from realclimatescience.com, setting the record straight about science. As I mentioned in yesterday's video, the U.S. appears headed towards herd immunity, and CDC is in a race against time to take credit for it. The Washington Post just reported this. The number of new infections reported each day is reaching dizzying new heights. On Friday, the daily U.S. caseload topped 74,000, according to data tracked by the Washington Post. Masks are now mandatory in more than half of U.S. states, with the governors of Arkansas and Colorado the latest to issue face-covering orders. Maryland Governor Larry Hogan, Rhino, chairman of the National Governors Association, said that masks should be mandated in states across the country. California Governor Gavin Newsom, Democrat, on Friday announced new guidelines that will bar schools in 32 hotspot counties from reopening in the fall unless they meet strict standards for preventing the spread of coronavirus. Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds, Republican, said Friday the state schools must resume in-person instruction. Now let's look at what CDC is trying to do and what they're up against. The Washington Post says that cases are reaching dizzying new heights. And Dr. Fauci said last week that we were headed towards 100,000 new cases a day. So what Fauci and CDC are doing to achieve their propaganda coup is to massively ramp up testing. If you do twice as many tests, you're going to detect twice as many cases. But they've run into a snag. The blue line is the percent positive COVID-19 tests, and you can see that's actually been declining for the last 10 days or so. So in order for Dr. Fauci to get up to his 100,000 cases per day, they're going to have to probably double the number of tests which are being given, which seems unlikely to occur. And the U.S. daily death rate is way down, despite the efforts to sabotage it with the massive social justice protests we've been seeing over the last 6 weeks. Not to say that they completely failed. In a number of places like Houston, they were successful in sabotaging the COVID situation and the economy with 3 weeks of massive protests. Dr. Fauci boldly told people not to go to Trump rallies, but he never said a word about not going to BLM protests. Now let's look again at the slide I showed yesterday with a claim from 3 weeks ago. The claim was that states with mask rules were seeing a decline in cases and states without mask rules were seeing a large increase in cases. The two states in the West with mask rules at that time were California and New Mexico. And since then there's been a huge increase in cases in both states. This is California and this is New Mexico. There's no indication from the empirical data that mask rules cause the infection rate to go down. In fact, we're seeing the exact opposite. But in New York, we're seeing a completely different pattern. They had a huge number of cases back in March and April when the governor was sending thousands of sick people into nursing homes. But since then, the number of cases has dropped off sharply, and there's been no recent increase. This is an important point. CDC is massively ramping up testing, yet the number of new cases in New York is not increasing. And the number of deaths in New York has also dropped off close to zero. So why is New York behaving so differently from California? Well, the answer to that is pretty clear. New York is approaching herd immunity. Most of the people in New York City probably got exposed to the virus back in March and April. And now the virus is having a very difficult time finding people to infect. Whereas in California, which locked down very early in order to stop the spread of the virus is having no trouble finding new people to infect. Sooner or later, every state is going to have to reach herd immunity like New York did early on. You can't hide from the virus permanently. All that lockdowns and wearing masks do is create fear and extend the economic misery. California could have been done with this by now had they adopted Sweden's approach, which I'll be discussing again in a minute. I've used this graph in my last couple videos, and this is a very important graph. There's one blue dot for each of the 50 states. Across the x-axis is deaths per million population, and up the y-axis is the percent daily change in total cases. States with higher deaths per million population are seeing a much smaller percent change in the total cases every day. This is because these states, generally in the Northeast with high death rates, are getting close to herd immunity. But the states over in this part of the graph are not yet at herd immunity. Now let's compare what's going on in the United States to what occurred in Sweden. Unlike the United States, Sweden took a very intelligent, thoughtful, science-based approach. Sweden never locked down, they never mandated masks, they never shut down their under 16 schools, they never shut down their restaurants and bars, and they did everything they could to protect human rights. Sweden's goal was to spread the virus through the low-risk community in order to get to herd immunity. They never had any serious problems in their schools because death rates for under 16 children are extremely low, and it's very rare for them to spread the virus to adults. As a result, they're now at or near herd immunity, they did minimal damage to their economy and human rights, and they showed the world how science is supposed to be done. The one thing which Sweden didn't do well was protect their nursing homes in the early days, and thus they had a large spike in the number of deaths back in April. COVID alarmists bash on Sweden constantly about their death rate, but the reality is that they did much better than many places which did lock down, including New York City, New Jersey, New York State, San Marino, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Belgium, District of Columbia, Louisiana, Andorra, the UK, Michigan, Spain, Italy, Illinois, and Maryland, where Governor Larry Hogan lives. Sweden showed that the virus can be defeated without lockdowns, without mask mandates, without destroying the economy, without closing the schools, and without violating human rights. What Sweden accomplished is a huge embarrassment to CDC and Dr. Fauci. So now, as the U.S. approaches herd immunity after months of chaotic, incoherent policy and 40 million unemployed, CDC is desperate to take credit for it. And apparently they think that if they can get everybody to put masks on in the next few weeks, they can take credit for it when we do reach herd immunity. This is exactly the same scam with what went on with the ozone hole back in the 1980s. If they can get government to take some sort of action, they can take credit for saving the world. California has had mask rules in place for a long time, yet the number of cases there has tripled over the past month. Perhaps Californians just don't know how to wear their masks properly. Toto doesn't like scientific scams, and he thinks that we should go up to the high country today because it's really hot outside, so that's where we're headed. Visit him on the web at realclimatescience.com. He's been pulling back the curtain on junk science and propaganda for a long time.